Welcome back, everybody. I hope that you're having a great day today. I'm here with Robert B. Davis II, and we are going through The Art of War. This is a continuation of our ongoing discussion of Sun Tzu's incredibly powerful work, The Art of War. And I'm with Rob Davis here. He has a YouTube channel as well with his title named Robert B. Davis II. And what we're doing is we'll do these long form kind of interview discussions that kind of last maybe about an hour or so, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. And I know that sometimes it's kind of hard to digest these long thought processes in those stretches of time. So what Rob is doing with his channel is he's taking these kind of longer discussions and he's breaking them down in smaller increments, 5, 10, 15-minute increments that are a little more digestible. And so that is something that Rob's doing as well. In the link below in the description, there is also going to be his Substack that you have access to as well. All of the works that he's done over the past few years, as well as some that are coming up, I think, right, Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen.
Yeah, excellent. All right. So in last episode, we kind of just went through the first five chapters or so, and just did a roughly a general breakdown of it. And so with this one is going to be a little different. Rather than just kind of following the next few chapters and going into more of the tactics and the stratagems of the operation of an actual army, we're going to be getting a little deeper into some topics that Rob himself wanted to bring up that tie in with the general overview of the book itself. So, Rob, if you can go ahead and kind of lead us into that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So in the introduction, the version I have, they give a lot of background, some of its actual history, some of its more legend. And one of the legends around Sun Tzu himself is this story about how he's escaping with his father and brother from the whatever the bad guys are of the time. And he's escaping from this state, going into the other state. And his father sort of makes this prediction about him. He says about his brother that something else needs to happen. But with Sun Tzu, he says his character is hard and stubborn and able to endure disgrace. He is capable of accomplishing great affairs. And this, I think, is a springboard, but sort of encapsulates the idea I want to talk about. And it's these aspects of like what kind of mind do you need? What kind of spirit do you need to lead, to lead in battle as well as lead a state? And the way it's presented here is just a little bit counterintuitive, and that ties in with a lot of stuff that's in the Art of War as well. There's counterintuitive tactics and strategies, and he says his character is hard and stubborn, right? That's not, we don't think of that as beneficial. And he says he's able to endure disgrace. Therefore, he's capable of accomplishing great affairs. So, I wanted to sort of go through starting on not necessarily just that idea, but some of the ideas that come up in these chapters. I pulled out from 1 through 10 these ideas of what what does it say about the mindset going into building a successful military attack. And so another note from, I think, that same legend, it says, haste, fear of being labeled a coward, and personal emotions such as anger and hatred should never be permitted to adversely influence state and command decision making. I think that's just an analysis of the message, not necessarily from the legend itself, but this idea of, well, you can't let your personal interests, your emotions in a moment affect the decision making. And that's kind of a basic statement. And some people go, well, yeah, duh. But then it's helpful to ask, well, how do you achieve that? How are you able to govern yourself so that you don't let anger overtake you in a moment where it might overtake you? How would you be able to endure disgrace? What would have to happen inside of you to be able to be disgraced and take it on yourself and say, Okay, and move through it. So I think that's where the benefit will lie in sort of pointing towards that. And then the art of war, as it shows up and gives us this advice, it sort of weaves this pattern in of this is the kind of person you have to be to deal with these difficult situations. So in chapter one, this is actually one of my favorite quotes from the whole book, and it's something that I used in my first part of the book that I wrote, Defund the Fun Police. Um, and it's if they are angry, perturb them. So if the people, or if your enemy is angry, if they are able to be conquered by anger, if they are vulnerable to becoming angry, right? Take advantage of that. Make them angry, poke them in a way that they don't like, right? I'm not sure how uh yours translates that, but it's sort of in the middle of the chapter one for me.
That I'm not entirely sure, but see that ties into using the enemy's weak points to your advantage, right? Like your ability to become easily perturbed or easily shaken off of somebody's comment uh, is essentially a sign of weakness, right? And that's
Right, exactly.
I'll share some examples where I don't know if you've experienced this in your life immediately or if you've seen this kind of on the news, but or anywhere. It's always when a leader becomes extremely emotional, either through anger or through, where that's just often perceived as weakness. Like
Yeah,
most men perceive a leader to be like really aggressive and to just like go head on in. And I think that there's a difference between emotional aggression and then just decisive action as aggression. Like just striking with precision
right,
being aggressive versus running in and starting throwing stuff and screaming and like that's always that's a sign of being able to be easily shaken,
right,
not centered. So that's an incredible point. And if you can kind of tease your opponent in such a capacity to where they start to like, their anger increases and you're like like a composer, you're able to use, to play them in that sense, then they're often they often capitulate to their own, you know, emotion.
right. Right. Well, this is actually, I mean, a point that I think I'll say it this way. Uh, I think people are worried about this with Trump,
Mm.
right? I I hear a lot of people who are liberals or more liberal who don't like Trump. They say a lot of things, and not all of them are reasonable. Some of them because they're perturbed by Trump. They're angry and perturbed. But one thing they try to point to, I think, is that, well, he's emotionally volatile. Um, he's got, his ego. So therefore, if you've got an ego, then you're going to need to react to defend it, and you're not going to act in a way that's, um, yeah, like reasonable, effective for the greater good. You're going to be centered on yourself. And whether or not that's true, that is something people are worried about because we tend to universally acknowledge this point that if you're emotionally, I would say that if you're reacting from self-interest, right? If you're just interested in your own emotions, your own desire to be perceived in a certain way, then that's going to cause issues. We recognize that. But what you're saying about like decisive action, that might involve emotion, that it might involve that aspect of aggression, but it's about acting forcefully towards a goal that is not defined by your own self-interest. It's about what's actually supposed to be good. And so I think that's the difference there.
That's it, and I love this topic. I wasn't really expecting to go in this direction, but then what comes to mind is, there have been several times, let's say like, and I don't mean like using aggression as fuel in a sense is healthy, right? In moderate amounts. Like you don't want to act impulsively off of aggression and completely blow down like we would consider Trump being a bull in a china shop, right? Just causing complete havoc, right?
Right.
There's a difference between using aggression as like the catalyst to for destruction to ensue, or there's the ability to use aggression as inherent fuel to motivate you to get something done, right? Like if let's, what was it that good old George W. said? He's like fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, whatever that saying was, right? It was like you could only be crossed a certain amount of times before you like stand up and do something about it, right? So
Mhm.
there's that aspect of it, but I think what we're facing now, especially among men, and kind of invoking a sense of inherent leadership, a sense of like of decisiveness, is the necessity to get out of like a state of apathy, out of a state of just like being too overly passive.
Yeah.
But at the
Hmm.
same time, if somebody says, "Hey, man, I don't like your face very much, or I don't like I don't really like what you're up for, man. I don't really like you." Like you don't react to that. You can remain centered and not
Yeah.
like not blow up. So it's like a balance. Like men need to become um a little more assertive, but at the same time, when you're pushed, you're still able to remain centered and stoic and and calm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of stuff to go off on that. I've been thinking about this a lot. So I think I'll say a couple things before we get back on track with Art of War, if that's all right. But so with I just wanted to go three ways once and now I'm lost. With the idea of men using aggression in a positive way, I was just listening to Jordan Peterson and what's his name, Jonathan Haidt, in their most recent podcast, and they talked about the fact, just a fact, anger is an approach emotion, meaning it gets you moving. It has some motivation power, and so in that sense, it has an aspect of positiveness. Like it has a negative affect. Like it doesn't feel great, but it does feel better than depression because it doesn't just shut you down. It gets you going. And this actually, I first learned this through a guy we've both listened to and talked about, David R. Hawkins. He talked about there's
Yes.
like depression, and then anger is one step above that because at least it gets you out of depression, right? And
Yeah.
there's also like that's also just useful to know because like there's a legitimate what spirit of the age or cultural moment, whatever it is, there's a common driving of depression. Like people are being depressed. And not everyone who gets depressed is just gonna roll over and be and just like the natural course of action for some people is just a fire's gonna light in them and they're gonna be like, no, I mean, there's what's that poem? Do not go quietly into that good night. People are enthused by this, and they're like, anger is going to awake in people who are depressed. Not in all of them, but in some of them. And if that's not usable, if that's not directed, then they're just going to explode. Then they're, well, I guess, I mean, I'm angry, and people are telling me I shouldn't be angry, but everyone's just telling me I should be depressed. Screw them, I'm going to be angry. Right. So, I mean, that's just a whole thing. I'm going to go down a lot of trails with that. But anyhow, I think that's helpful to know is like this, it has this positive movement in it in the sense of it gets you going.
It really
Uh,
does. You get
yeah,
into a state of like of depression, right? Where it's like you feel intrinsically on like a soul level that you're not doing something you should be doing, right? Like
right, right.
that's why you're depressed. You're not following your dharma, you're not following your purpose, you're not in alignment, you're not pushing forward. And the way to get back from that is like, man, this really sucks. I'm tired of this. Like I'm
Yeah.
it's not like, oh, okay, like I guess, I'm tired of being depressed. Maybe I should go back the other way. No, it's always like, oh, I'm just like, what am I doing? Like
Yes.
we gotta get going. And so
Yeah.
in a sense, yes, that's exactly what it is. That level of like of anger, of almost just like repulsion for the state that you're in is the catalyst to like you need grace, you need patience with yourself, you need self-love. But in that initial moment, that snap back into the other direction, it's always anger, right? It's always like, you know what? I'm done. I'm tired of this.
Right.
Let's clean the slate here.
Right. Right. So, and then that scales up to the level of actual warfare. And I feel like there's a common, again, like spirit in especially United States of like, whether spoken or not, like pacifism of like all violence is bad, um, any killing is wrong, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm definitely not saying all violence is good or that all killing is good or that killing's okay. But I mean, as of now, I believe that there are just cases for violent action or war. And then that comes to the point where it's like, okay, what we were talking about, when you have a leader, you're in this point and you need to make a decision, you need to do something, you need direct action. And I'll just tie us back to Art of War here. At the end of chapter 4, he's been talking about how you don't want prolonged warfare, you don't want to drag things out, it's not good. And he says, well, therefore, thus the victorious army is like a ton compared with an ounce. While defeated, the army is like an ounce weighed against a ton. The combat of the victorious is like the sudden release of a pent-up torrent down 1,000-fathom gorge. This is the strategic disposition of force. So he's saying, get in position, assess it, know what you're doing, be there at the right time, and then unleash as much as you possibly can to be completely victorious and be done as fast as possible. So he's totally on board. He's lauding. He's saying absolute destructive force. And again, without commenting on right or wrong, whatever it was, the decision that Trump made recently in bombing Iran, right, is to go in at the time when you can execute, get complete destruction, and make it happen. That's what he did. We'll see how it unfolds in the future. I'm not making judgments one way or the other. I'm just saying that's an example of executing this strategy of saying, we've got an objective, we have the ability to do it. Let's get it done and let's get it done immediately with force and be done and sort of close the book on it?
Yeah, I mean, in situations like that, they're they're always a little hairy, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
they're always so the act itself can be viewed as being extremely decisive, right? Like and plus, right, like this operation, it took like years to plan out. I think it initially started under the Biden administration to some extent,
Hmm.
getting all this stuff together
All
and
the intel and whatnot.
intel coordination, all that. And so like the act itself, right, was very uh Theodore Rooseveltian, right? You're speaking softly, but you're carrying a big stick. It's like, this is what I can do. It's like almost, this is what I can do. I'm going to show you what I can do in just a little bit here, and then let the imagination kind of take the rest. Now, the issue that you see in the larger scheme of things is just like how these things are playing out, is are these geopolitical expeditions really for the benefit of the United States? And that's an entirely different
Right.
discussion on its own. But if we're taking just the action of bombing, right, of going out and then showing a potentially a dangerous country what you're capable of, that's getting the message across. And I think that what's interesting though is that we're on this world stage, right? And so even though we're seeing these things happen, they're on the phone with each other saying like, "Hey, we're about ready to do this," like get, like what didn't Iran or Tehran, didn't they remove most of these things out of these bases anyway because they knew something was coming? And then, the retaliation across Qatar or something when they're doing their peace talks, it's kind of a retaliation. It's it's show it to an extent, so we always have
Yeah.
to take that into consideration. But just, to wrap that up, the situation itself of dropping those bunker busters on was a decisive action. And it was like, this is what we're gonna do. There's no real emotion. There's an accumulation of energy. Like if you're looking at the planning of this over years, like the buildup of this just to get to that point of striking, decisively can still be seen as aggressive as because if you're in the corner doing push-ups, you're building your body, you're training, you're in kind of your warrior montage moment, getting ready, building that energy up. That's still aggression is still at play in that sense, potentially, because you're focusing on getting to that outcome. And sometimes you can use that energy to fuel you, but it's all for that buildup. It's all for that dropping of the bunker busters. It's all for that, like, that championship title, that decisive battle that really plays it out. And so if you can really use that accumulation of energy wisely, it's always just for that one moment. It's like I'll drop it with this here. What was it that Abraham Lincoln said? He's like, if you give me like 8 hours to cut down a tree, I'm going to spend the first 6 hours sharpening the axe. So most of the time is in preparation. Most of the time is in that planning phase, that
Yeah.
accumulation phase.
Yeah. And I think that emphasizes this point of it's not about emotion. It's not about personal desire. It's about disciplined execution. And in the moment of that execution, yes, it's intense. Yes, it uses all the resources it can. It uses high energy, etc. But that energy doesn't govern you, you govern it. And so again, the quote I read from chapter one, like if they're angry, perturb them.
Yeah.
He basically says the same thing later in chapter eight. He says, one easily angered and hasty can be insulted. So he gives you an idea of how to anger them, insult them, right? If they're so governed by their emotions, if they're so concerned about that, take advantage of it. Throw them an insult, make it throw get that to throw them off guard. And then he continues, he says, one obsessed with being scrupulous and untainted can be shamed. And this, I think, is right up there with my favorite quotes of the book. Being obsessed with being scrupulous and untainted, like having this idea. I think this is so revealing to this age of like cancel culture and everything being online. And like, if you're obsessed with looking perfect, like you're screwed.
Right.
It's not going to work. You already lost. If you're obsessed with being scrupulous and untainted, you can be shamed. And shame is a powerful weapon, and it's used against people on all sides of the spectrum. And if if you are conquered by shame, you will be conquered by shame. Like that is a weakness, right? And I'm not saying just be proud and arrogant and never take criticism and never learn from it. Obviously not. But also don't don't be so proud about being humble that you have to give a show of always being ashamed of any little thing. Like, yeah, you screwed up. Yeah, you did something. Yeah, you were a bad person. Okay. Like at the end of the day, whatever, we're all sinners and redemption is on the table. And it does involve like trying to do better, but I mean, I'll just say like the sort of whatever modern white guilt movement or any aspect of the woke stuff of just like I am going to get you to do everything that I want you to do because if you don't, you're a bad person. Like you don't get to control me. I am a bad person, but you don't get to control me. Like that, that's just not how it works. So, um, yeah, I just find it fascinating that it's in this book, and I find it very very poignant.
That's a really big, that's a huge one. It's like if you're the gym guy, man, if you're the gym guy and you're going to the gym 7 days a week and you're known as the dude that hits the gym 7 days a week, if you miss one day, that whole persona is just done,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's like, and because of that, there's no way that you're going to be the 6 day gym guy now, and nobody's going to tell you that you're the gym goer that was formerly known as the 7 day gym goer, but now you're the 6 day guy, right? Like your personality, your identity, your ego is attached to these things, and that makes it extremely vulnerable. So if somebody comes around and pokes that, right, and says, "Oh, now you're the 6 day gym guy," that's that's going to get you caught in your head to where eventually you're going to be the no day gym guy.
Yeah.
Like you're going
Yeah.
to stop going entirely. And especially with a lot of this ability to attack people's character, you're saying, "Oh, you're this word," "Oh, if you have this opinion, then you're automatically shoved in this category and this and
Yep.
this." And then you get the online trolls, or you get people that, and I've come to realize that having a strong inner character, like especially, or or an inner critic, having a
Yeah.
strong
Yeah.
inner critic, right? Especially one that's incredibly witty. Like
Yeah.
everything else, like anything else these trolls come up with is like, "Oh, I've
Yeah.
called myself better than that." Like, come on.
Dude,
Like,
trolls
well,
are a test. Trolls are 100% a test.
that's
And
it.
like that's it. Like you could, I mean, Jordan Peterson goes vehement against trolls and has all kinds of things to say about their character and whatnot. But at the end of the day, they have to live with themselves, and like they're not living a great life, and
Right. And
like
this
they're either affecting you or not. Like I don't know. There's a lot to say about that, but I think just the point that trolls are a test. Like, are you so thrown off by trolls? That's the main question. And then,
that's
well, maybe other people will get caught up in whatever the trolls are saying. Maybe, but that's kind of their problem, you know?
And so how centered are you able to remain whenever these external situations are occurring, And are you able to crumble under the pressure of somebody else's illusory perception of you, right?
Right.
Like if somebody's telling me that I am a piece of crap, right, on like a comment or something, it's like I've said that to myself in much eloquent ways to
Yeah.
where that's just peanuts. I
Right.
I know that, right? Like you said, like I already know I'm a sinner. I already know that I've messed up in certain ways, and I've told myself that and I've lived with that. And so if you're coming around to remind me of that, I appreciate the reminder, but it's not going to help stop me doing what I'm doing, right? Like
Right.
because with what we're doing, there's a level of as essentially repentance for a lot of the stuff. Like we've gone through a lot of crap. People go through a lot of stuff, especially in regards to addiction, right? And acting completely selfishly. It's like, well, if you're going around having put down your addictions, you stop doing what you're doing. And not only that, but you're helping others do the same thing. Like that's the opposite, and while you're doing that, if people are calling you a piece of crap, it's like, yeah, I get it, I know, but I'm still trying to do what I'm doing here.
Right.
And
Right.
then so I just want to finish with that with this last point here. This is chapter 8, and this ties in with what you're talking about in terms of the character, the strong moral foundational uh, character of a leader. And he talks about the 5 dangerous faults which may affect a general. One
Mhm.
is recklessness, which leads to destruction, right? Like that's what we think of as just acting out of aggression, a bull in a china shop, like kind of a Trump personality, right? Just recklessness, not acting decisively. Uh, Now, whether he does or not, that's up to people's opinions, but at least that's kind of the persona that he gives off, is this recklessness, even though in many instances he's not reckless by any stretch.
Mhm.
Two, cowardice, which leads to capture. That's another one that we're talking about. A level of being indecisive, of being passive, of being too caught up in our head trying to analyze the situation rather than actually acting, right? Like we don't capitalize on talking to the girl because we're afraid of how we're going to do it. And then by the time we get the balls to do it, she's already walked away. And then now it's gone. So that's cowardice. A hasty temper. Number three, a hasty temper, which can be provoked by insults, which is what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like if somebody calls me a piece of crap, like, am I now going to stop talking about what we're talking about and focus on that now?
Mhm.
Like that's a weakness of character in a sense. If you are easily provoked by insults. Number four, a delicacy of honor, which is sensitive to shame, which is what we're talking about. Like, oh, I'm the 7 day gym guy, or oh, I'm
Right.
known as being like the morally virtuous guy, and so any attack on that is going to completely bring me down and get me into a pit of shame. And then the last one is number five, which is over solicitude for his men, which exposes him to worry and trouble. Now that one's a little differently, right? Because that's being around your men, I think is how I'm taking that.
It's like it's like caring about it's like being too so I would say like being too motherly about them. Mine says one who loves the people can be troubled. Like if you're a general
right.
and you're worried about the fact that one guy forgot his pillow, like the proper response is like too bad
That's a hard one
and move
because
on. It's harsh, but
because Christ went like he would go back to get that one sheep, and like he would
right.
leave the 99 to find the one. And I think that that's what goes against this. So it's like it's kind of
Well,
difficult. Yep.
let you're totally right. I want to expand on that, but so you read those five. The first two, I think the translations here are interesting as well. Um, you said one who's reckless, right? Was the first one. Mine says one committed to dying can be slain. Like so,
Oh,
if there's the general that's just like gung ho and like I don't care if I die, then that's a problem,
yeah.
right? And then it's like Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, where he was like he needed to die. That was his destiny. He was all for it. And then the second one, you were saying, what was your word for the second?
Cowardice. Cowardice.
Cowardice, right? This one says one committed to living can be captured, right? So
Oh,
if you're committed to dying, that's a problem. But if you're too committed to living, that's also a problem. And there's that balance. And I think it is a flaw in this one that it leaves that fifth one. It says. Um, Mine says one who loves the people can be troubled. Yours says one who's
over
overly
solicitude.
solicitous.
Yeah.
Overly solicitous. I think that's a better translation because it emphasizes the overly. But I think this one should have
Right.
2 points as well, right? If you love the people, you can be troubled by the problems of the people. But if you completely disregard the people, then you won't have any connection with the people and you won't have their Tao. That's actually in other places. There is this balance even in here. And I think that that's important. Like what you said, the gym example is relatively trivial and maybe seems kind of silly. But even there, the principle that's going to alleviate that, right? The guy who's so obsessed with being the gym guy, being the perfect 7 days a week, what is going to free that man? Like to truly free him, which not doesn't mean free him to not care about the gym and sit around and eat potato chips because the gym doesn't matter, but free him to be an even more effective gym goer because he won't be defeated by his inevitable failures once in a while. The thing that's going to free you is redemption. It's repentance and redemption, like the ability to say, "Oh yeah, I messed up. I'm not perfect. And that's not a flippant, "Oh, I'm not perfect, so I can do whatever I want," or it's not a big deal. Like, no, I actually sinned. Like, I actually broke something. Maybe the missing a gym day is not a sin, but you're going to sin in your life, right? You're going to do something that significantly hurts someone else, that significantly damages, your relationship with someone, your respect for yourself, your relationship with God. And what's the answer there? Well, the answer is, yeah, like God's aware and he's willing to forgive you. Not in the sense of you can go on and do whatever you want and never worry about it. Like you did do something wrong, but you are loved in throughout that, and through that the door is open to you turning around and returning to the right path. And so, like the gym guy, right? You can be destroyed by the fact that you were unable to maintain perfection and then go from trying to achieve perfection to um, giving up and saying, I'm worthless, right? That would be a life without redemption, without forgiveness, without mercy, right? You have this psychological attitude towards yourself of being too stringent, not being merciful enough, right? And so we're saying is that, it's not all about hard perfection and awesomeness. It's like if you actually want to be good, like if you actually want to be effective, if you actually want to be, you want to flourish, you want to be, I mean, masculine, right? Successfully masculine. You got to have mercy in that for yourself. And if you don't, like, yes, for yourself, you have to have it for others, because if you don't have it for others, you're not going to have it for yourself. That's what Christ says. So, right, when we say masculinity, we talk about energy, we talk about anger, we talk about violence. That all sort of carries this connotation of like hardness and insensitiveness, and that, I mean, it's just not true, because that way just doesn't work. You can try it, but you'll fail. And so what actually works and what's actually going to enable you to be that full-fledged thing that you want to be is having the correct portion of mercy and the openness of redemption there. So that I think again that is an appropriate thing to bring in here to balance it out so it doesn't appear like we're just saying, oh yeah, like hardcore war all the time, be a man, fight it out, never pay attention to anything. Like, well, no, that's actually in the camp of being like reckless, like you were saying. That's in the camp of not being governed. That's in the camp of not being able to control your men, not having a good relationship with your army, not being able to command them in the way that you want to command them. Both your army of other people, but also this applies internally, like how you govern yourself. How are you going to deploy your troops, meaning how are you going to order your life throughout the week? If you just schedule yourself 100% balls to the wall every single day, you're a general who's driving yourself too hard. David Goggins can do it, apparently, and like good for him. I'm not gonna like whatever. But I'll just say personally, like I drove myself really hard when I was young. I had this workout routine that I was like fixed to. And I ended up getting an autoimmune disease and being hospitalized. My body was just like no, like we're not doing this. Um, and if you want to say, hey, well, you're just weak, like whatever, do it, get up, get after it every day. I don't know, like God commands a Sabbath, and maybe there's some people who need more rigor. Well, I think there are people who need more rigor and some people who need less. And then I mean, that just brings around redemption and mercy in itself of like, how do you figure out where you fit in the spectrum and how do you relate to yourself? Like, I'm not David Goggins. If the answer to life is everyone being David Goggins, I'm screwed. Right? So if you don't have mercy in your system breaks. And if you want a system that runs well, if you want a system that's effective, that's going to be able to go into war and survive and respond through the chaos and recover, then you need a system that has that bit of mercy in it, right? Because that's going to be what lasts through that and what enables you to do your best through that. So I think that balances out maybe what we're talking about.
Absolutely, it does. And Going back to the initial, and I think this was the initial point made in chapter one that you brought up in viewing rigidity as something wrong, as something bad. And I agree with that. I agree with that. You don't need to be overly rigid. You don't need to be the 7 day gym guy. So I bring up here, page six, page 15 in my book. Um, Water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows. The soldier works out his victory in relation to the foe whom he is facing. Therefore, just as water remains no constant shape, so in warfare there are no constant conditions. So the more we grasp onto a level of rigidity, of certainty, of inmalleability, if that's even a word, it goes to show that you need that ability to sway and you need that ability to move around. We're of the mindset what you're talking about of like a David Goggins mentality or of a 100% go get it mentality is putting too much focus, putting too much awareness on the external. It's too it's going to get, right? And I think that was a time of the past where, where the revelations occurred externally. And so the more we did in the external, the better the things were. The more, if we worked 16 hours a day, the better the things were going to be, okay? But see, now we're kind of changing it, and especially if we're bringing in Hawkins material, okay, in working through like let's say depression into anger and into some more positive states of being. This is an internal process, and so that level of forgiveness, that level of repentance, is entirely internal. That's an internal process and digestion of these emotions through letting them go. And then on the other side is something better. And so if you have a bunch of people, if you have a bunch of leaders that don't have the ability to remove themselves to a degree and actually have a period of just rest through meditation. And I say leader loosely. I mean, everybody's a leader in their own life. I mean, this is everybody. If you're too focused on that external, that hustle mentality, that grind mentality, you know, not saying to go on the other episode side of the spectrum and just go outside, man, and just touch some tree, like do actually do that. Go outside, touch some actually really cool. But you got to find that middle, that middle way, that middle path where you're able to have that kind of intuitive, intrinsic resonance within you, where that compass, where you can push yourself, but then you can also calm yourself down and bring yourself back to center, rather than just being absolutely balls to the wall all the time, getting stuff done. Because we always burn ourselves out, and especially when our ego, when that aspect of us is our identity is centered around that go get it mentality. Like if you are that 7 day a week gym guy and you drop a day, you know, you're gonna crumble, right? Unfortunately, most people do. If you don't have that ability to bring it back, like you'll fall into that shame, you'll fall into that guilt. Same thing as if, like, let's say you relapse over an addiction, right? Like you drink. It's not, yes, the fact that you drank or the fact that you engaged in whatever substance is wrong.
Right.
And you should know that.
Right.
The proper reaction isn't to wallow in the guilt and shame, which is just going to generate more perpetual cycles of addiction where you're just going to fall into it, right? It's an acknowledgement that, oh yeah, I messed up. I am fallible, right? I'm a human. I'm a fallible. I messed up here. I identify that. What's the best way to get back on the right course now? Well, it's to have grace, it's to forgive myself and to move on. Because and this is something that a lot of us don't have it's hard to realize, right? Like it's easy for us to forgive others, right? If somebody else relapsed and we're like, hey, dude, like, pick it
Yeah.
back up. Like it's time, you got this. I know you got this. But if you do, like if like then that inner critic comes out. It's like, oh, you should have see, I knew I never was gonna amount to anything in my life, and blah, 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 blah. And next thing you know, you're at the bottom of a bottle again because you've convinced yourself that that's the only way out of it.
Hmm.
Oh,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I think this idea of,
oh, we got a little cut here. A little
but
pause. Oh, are you there? Yeah, okay, you're back.
yeah.
Hello?
Okay. So, this is maybe a silly example, but just dealing with this idea of rigidity and whatnot. And I see it, it's throughout the art of war, that balance. And, um, it's in a lot of other Eastern philosophy as well. And so now it bothers me, the movie Mulan, where the archetype is just, oh, there's the masculine war people and they think they know everything, but really they're just stupid men and they can't ever adapt to the situation, and they all just do only men things, and they can't
Yeah.
think outside the box, and you need the woman to come in and be right and get everything right and adapt to the situation and do. It's like, yes, that has happened many times in history, and yes, men maybe fall into that more. But like according to the wisdom tradition of the men, it literally says that's not what you're supposed to do, and you're supposed to be able to adapt. And so, anyways, now Mulan bothers me because I read this and was like, wait a minute. The ancient Chinese were not just stupid patriarchal men. They were like actually wise, and actually wise men exist and wise leaders. And this part really interests me. Might be a whole topic in itself, but it's worth bringing up here, I think. In chapter 8, he just says, there are commands from the ruler that are not accepted.
Mm-hmm.
Like, whoa, that's a weird statement.
Yeah.
But he continues and clarifies it in chapter 10. He says, even though the ruler has instructed that combat should be avoided, if you must engage in combat, it is permissible. If the Tao of warfare indicates you will not be victorious, even though the ruler instructs you to engage in battle, not fighting is permissible. And I don't think I have it noted down, but somewhere else he says, like, the ruler has to not get in the way of the general. And so we have these ideas of like these hierarchies of like, I am the ruler and I do all the wise things and I make the decisions because I know all the things. But really, what he's saying is the ruler picks out a wise general. And then he gives the general an order, but he lets the general play that out as best he can. And so, like, if you're in the moment and the ruler says, look, do not get in a fight, we don't want to engage these people right now, but you're cornered or whatever comes up, like you have like to you the clear thing as a general is we have to fight. The ruler's not here. You have permission to make a different decision. Like he's empowered you with the ability to respond to the moment and trust you with that. And same thing, if he says, go fight right now, we need to beat them, now's the time. But you look at the setup of the battlefield and you say, we're not going to win this, then you don't do it. And so there's this flexibility, and again that ties into repentance and forgiveness. Like you have to be able to stand up and say, no, I know that's my order, I'm not going to follow it. Now that creates problems if like everybody believes that way and everybody makes their own decision, but you still have to have that flexibility built into the system. And I think it ties back to the beginning where it's like someone who is so obsessed with being perfect can be shamed, or the legend at the beginning. Uh, he's able to endure disgrace, therefore he's capable of accomplishing great affairs. As a general, if you disobey your leader, you are risking being disgraced. Like that's a possibility. But if you're so afraid of disgrace that you're going to lead your men into battle and be utterly defeated just because you didn't want to disobey the leader, then that's more of a problem. So it's better. I think what this is saying is it's better to be the general who says, we're not going to win this battle. It's going to be a waste of our men. We should not fight and fight again another day. You come back, the ruler's mad at you. He doesn't accept your reasons. You go into disgrace. it's still better to be that guy and have saved the men, assuming that you were right, even if no one recognizes it, than to be the general who leads them in and everyone dies and your country loses their men and your emperor doesn't get the defeat he was looking for anyway. So, like the war ideal, the masculine ideal, the effective ideal is not this rigid patriarchal thing of just do what I say and I'm the best leader and uh, nobody else gets to disagree with me. And if you disagree with me, I'm gonna exile you. Like that, that's not how that's not how to effectively operate. Like if you if you want to be successful, you will find other smart people, other wise people, hopefully wiser than yourself, to advise you, and you'll listen to their advice. And yeah, it's a communal effort, and it's about engaging with other people in a positive and reciprocal way. And that involves mercy, that involves understanding, and that involves some flexibility.
And I see kind of the evolution of leadership, at least in respect to warfare as well, right? Like back in the day, the leaders on the front line, the leaders at the front of the charge, you know, rallying the men, and the men are behind him. You know,
Yeah.
he's the tip of the spear. And now, you know, especially if you look at like the United States hegemony, if you look at like different wars that the United States has faced, they've all been blunders to an extent because the wars are run from Washington and the guys at the front don't have any say, you know, and so there's a complete and utter disconnect. And so you need that wiggle room. Like if you're the guy, if you're the general and you're on the front line and your superior is on a hammock in Costa Rica somewhere, like ultimately that's your decision. You have to make the call. And it should be to your best ability in that moment. And like you're saying, if there's any level of reprimand, then that comes after the fact, you know, and it should be taken case by case. I think of like, you know, a great leader or a great manager might not be the best at a specific topic or at a specific field, but he has his people in place that know exactly what they're doing. You know, he's got his guy that knows how to ensure that the army is stocked with provisions. But then he also has the right guy to make sure that he's on the front line making the right decisions. And he has full confidence in this guy to make the decisions correctly. And, you know, I don't mean to bounce around these topics, but I'll also bring up that idea that you brought up in Mulan of kind of the patriarchy being a specific way, right? It's like men are like this. It's like men are Homer Simpson, men are
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, men are, you know, and in many ways and in many iterations of masculinity, that kind of nugget has always been there. There's always been kind of a an idea of men that has passed through society. But the idea that men don't have the ability to be introspective and intuitive, it's like, you know, especially if you look at men in terms of the elements, right? Like men are fire, men are penetrating, men are aggressive, they're assertive, they're expanding. And then women are water. They're intuitive, they're embracing, they're passive, they're flowing, they're, you know, nurturing. And honestly, either way, you should be comfortable in either scenario. Like sure, you can have a David Goggins mentality and just go balls to the wall. And yeah, that's being a man, you know. And not only is that being a man, but that's attractive to women. So you're going to get some good quality women if you're assertive in that capacity. At the same time, if my dog is on the couch and, you know, he needs some belly rubs, I'm going to give him some belly rubs, man.
Yeah.
And a lot of dudes might say like, "Hey dude, you're not being a real dude by giving your dog belly rubs." But you know what? I'm going to stand up for myself, and you know what? F you. Me giving my dog belly rubs is masculine as can possibly be, all right? Because he's my boy, and I give
Yeah.
him. So there's that different play on it as well.
Yeah.
What comes
And
to mind, essentially, just to kind of wrap up that train of thought, is you have to be in tune with your men. You have to know their names. You have to know
Mhm.
something about them. There has to be a level of connection,
Mhm.
like if you're on top of a mountain shouting orders down on your men that are at the base, there's no level of connection. You have to
Right.
come down from the top of your mountain and you have to mingle with the men. And in that sense, a lot of it is, just them being around your presence and knowing that you're actually there for them. You don't have to go coddle them and you don't have to go, rub under their chins and say, "Oh, hey, you're a good boy," but you have to be there. You have to look them in the eyes. You have to be present with them. And I think that there's that level of connection, of disconnect. Like the strongest men are being bowed to, right? But honestly, the strongest men is to say, no, you don't bow to anybody. And I'm
Mm.
man enough to say that I'm actually not at that level of needing to be bowed to.
Mhm.
I'm saying, no, we're gonna look each other in the eyes on an equal playing field and shake hands, as
Mhm.
opposed to one bowing to the other. And I think
Mhm.
there's that kind of a transition.
Yeah, totally. So, um, to be fair to David Goggins, I think he would agree with a lot about that about leadership, and we're kind of reacting to like the meme of David Goggins of like just how he, t his approach to kind of aggressively animating yourself. And
Yeah.
what came to mind, can I use a swear word on your channel?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So what came to mind is that meme level of David Goggins. You said, well, maybe that's being a man. I would say the David Goggins path is the path to not being a bitch.
Yeah.
Whatever you understand by that, I know that might offend some people, but like not going overly on the feminine side that affects men in a negative way, something like that. Like
Okay.
being too grossly feminine as a masculine person. There's some problem with that, whether you like the terminology or not. But it's like a harsh reaction and like don't do that. But it's not necessarily being a man in its full sense, unless of course you get past the meme of David Goggins, and I'm sure he has a more orbed personality than that. But there's a lot of quotes in throughout Art of War. I pulled them all out of those ideas of like interacting with the men
Yeah.
and and having your goals and their goals aligned and how you understand that. Um, Ooh, actually, if I can just capture one real quick. Um, so here he says, if the army is turbulent, the general lacks severity. So he's saying, if the army's not well organized, the general's not being severe enough. Okay, so that's sort of the strong masculine side. But later he says, one who frequently grants rewards is in deep distress. So if you're
Yes.
too rewarding, that's a problem. One who frequently imposes punishments is in great difficulty. If you have to punish people all the time, that's also a problem.
Mhm.
One who is at first excessively brutal and then fears the masses is the pinnacle of stupidity. So if you just come in there and you have that masculine, hyper masculine drive and rigidity, and you're just like, oh, I'm going to beat these people into submission. He says that's the pinnacle of stupidity right there. Um, and so if he says, if you impose punishments on troops before they have become attached, they will not be submissive. So you got to win their trust before you can exercise your authority. If they are not submissive, they will be difficult to employ. If you do not impose punishments after the troops have become attached, they cannot be used. And I think uh, part of this bleeds into like this idea of relating with people bleeds into what is the idea of the Tao? What is the Tao is like relation between people about the well-ordered state. And I'd be really interested in talking about that in another episode. But this last point that I have noted down here, they he talks about what I would call, again, going back to this side of yes, we're trying to be balanced. We're not doing this hyper masculine thing. But I think this encapsulates the point of what we mean by masculinity, or what I would say I mean by masculinity, and why the idea of army as masculine is actually necessary. And I think this is a huge point in modern culture, or revealing about modern culture. He says, if orders are consistently implemented to instruct the people, then the people will submit. If orders are not consistently implemented to instruct the people will not submit. So one whose orders are consistent. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. That's an interesting one though. But here I have it here. Um, if the people are well treated but cannot be employed, if they are loved but cannot be commanded, or when in chaos, they cannot be governed. They may be compared to arrogant children and cannot be used. So I think that's the issue that we see so much today. And this is sort of what the contention of this masculine feminine disagreement of like, ooh, patriarchy, ooh, whatever negative word you want to apply to the female side. Um, there's this idea of, well, we just need to love and support people and make sure that they're completely emotionally cared for and then they can flourish. And the idea here is that, well, there's actually spaces in the world, an army being one of them, where, if you don't have your pillow, too damn bad. If you're uncomfortable, if you forgot to change your socks, your underwear is dirty, I don't care. Not just don't care. And the fact that you're coming to me with this makes me not like you because you are a weak link in the chain. And I know a lot of people would say some things about that and say, "Oh, you should be understanding and whatever." But this is the point. If you're well treating people well is great. But if you are well treating people to the point where they become spoiled and can't be counted on, can't be employed, can't be deployed, you might say. If they are loved but cannot be commanded, if you're just so loving to them, you can't say, "Hey, wake up. You need to get something done." Well, you're not loving me by saying that. That was really harsh of you. That's a problem. When there's chaos going on, when you're being assaulted and you can't muster yourself, you can't muster your friends, you can't get yourself together like, "Look, guys, here's what we're doing. Let's do it now. Let's get through this. Let's get done." And someone's whining about their shoes being untied and someone wants a snack, like you're screwed at that point. Right? You got to be with yourself, you got to be with those people where it's action time. Okay, no matter what's happening, we're ready for action time. And so he says, when in chaos they cannot be governed, they may be compared to arrogant children who cannot be used. And I think that's just an encapsulation of society. It's just, Western American society, especially. We just are a bunch of arrogant children who are not fit to serve or be effective in any capacity because all we're concerned with is I want my entitlements and I want to be comfortable and nobody should say mean things to me.
Yeah, that's a that's a conversation for another time. That's something that we can really get into is kind of the slow kill, the slow burn of convenience and how that's just kind of eroding our freedoms. We're just kind of bending over or exposing ourselves in such a way by losing valuable life skills and offloading those life skills onto a centralized governmental entity that is then able to control. But we won't go into that in this conversation. But you're absolutely correct. There's that middle ground. Like, hey, look, the real lesson is if you forgot your shoes, the lesson is experiencing what it's like not to have shoes in a situation where you need them. And that's tough love, right? Like you're not going to learn because tomorrow you're going to forget your shoes too if we go back and get your shoes. So you need to experience the discomfort of not having them as a means to build not only like build up some literal calluses, but also some internal calluses. So you're
Right.
actually stronger. And it's not out of wanting to see somebody fail or see somebody struggle, but again, even if you're coming off of an addiction or you're going through a process, you have to experience what it is like to be at rock bottom. You need to experience incomprehensible demoralization. You need to experience what it's like to forget your socks or not to tie your shoes or whatever the case, locking yourself out of the house, and spending several hours outside. I don't know. But it's typically the experiences that build up that resiliency. It's like that's why like inoculation, right? Or kind of controlled exposures to things is a really good idea. You know, getting cold exposure, taking cold showers, doing things that kind of expand that spectrum of experiential discomfort so that whenever you're actually put in situations that are uncomfortable, it's like a cakewalk. You've done it to yourself all the time. It's like when a troll comes up and calls you a poopy head, you say, "Oh, I've called myself, a super poopy head." And so you calling me a poopy head doesn't do anything to me. You
Yeah.
know, that's exactly it. And I
Yeah.
think, Rob, that's a good spot to kind of wind down for the episode. We're coming up on, unless you have a couple more points that you want to add in.
I would just say the road of endless accommodation leads to Wally, right?
That's it.
Wally World.
That's it. That's it. It's a perpetual cycle. It never we keep searching for things that don't have a bottom. It's like a gorging of things, and it's yeah. But I think in the next episode we're going to touch quite a bit on conveniences, and I think that adding in like how do you put up a natural firewall, an internal firewall to protect yourself from these things so that you're not overly defensive and in thinking that you need to be coddled all the time, but at the same time you're not overly on an offensive streak where you're just, you know, running around throwing a bunch of shit at a wall hoping that something sticks, just kind of just shooting from the hip, so to speak.
Hmm.
So as we kind of close down, we'll go ahead and make some final announcements here. So if we're going to reach you, the channel is Robert B. Davis II. There's going to be a link in the description down below, also tied in with your Substack. The website is no longer available. Everything has been transitioned to the Substack, and I think it's a much, just the interface they have there and just ways of interaction are really good. So we got that down there. Also, if you want to join a group of men that are on the path of practicing retention, that are on the path of bettering themselves, if you want a group of men that are able to hold you accountable, in the link down in the description below, we have the Sons of God Discord group. Go ahead and give that a look. I know that it's very difficult for men to really start these types of practices to maybe stop patterns of addiction. And although we can do this on our own, there's also a level of accountability that is also really important in helping us really achieve these levels of our goals that we have for us. So if you want to give that a check as well, it's down there in the link below, in the description below. Other than that, this has been the second episode of our walkthrough of Sun Tzu's The Art of War, and we'll see what the next one's going to be about. Thank you very much for watching. God bless, and may peace be with you.